Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another study of Torah portion. This week's Torah portion is Tetzaveh. I'm starting the first Sicha, the first talk of the Rabbi from the book selections from Likutei Sichos on Tetzaveh. Number one, Baal HaTurim is one of the most recognizable commentators to the Torah. States that Parshas Tetzaveh, the portion of Tetzaveh, is the only Torah reading for Moshe's birth until the book of Devarim, where Moshe's name is not mentioned. Moshe was born in Shemot. The entire book of Bereshit, you won't find Moshe's name. In the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, there are a few portions that Moshe's name does not appear. But Moshe himself is speaking it, so therefore his name should not appear in all the portions. It's not in Akev, Re'ei, Shoftim, Tetzaveh, I believe. Then you have this week's portion, the only time from Moshe's birth that his name does not appear. The reason for the omission is that Moshe, when pleading with God to forgive the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf, he said, if you don't not forgive the Jewish people, erase me. I beg of you from your book which you have written, since the curse of a sage, even if it is made conditionally, will be fulfilled. Moshe's request to be erased from God's book, the Torah, was fulfilled in this Torah portion with the omission of his name. Moshe says to God, if you do not forgive the Jewish people for the golden calf, erase me from the Torah. Now, God forgave the Jewish people, but when a holy man makes a curse or issues a request, even unconditioned, and the condition is not met, the request is fulfilled in a minor way. So therefore, God erased his name from the Torah portion of this week. By the way, it's the portion right after Moshe's Yortzeit, the passing. He passed away on the 7th. Today is what, the 9th, I believe. I didn't set Tehillim this morning. But today is the 9th, so Moshe's Yortzeit, the middle of the Shiva, 7 days of mourning, is this Shabbat that we read. So it's always like that. The Torah is very precise in each of its details. It is thus necessary to conclude that Parshat Tetzaveh was specifically chosen as the Torah reading in which Moshe's request, erase me, I beg of you from your book, was fulfilled. That request was made in the course of the events described in Parshat Ki Tisa. In the next week's portion, we read about the golden calf. And that's when Moshe is asking to be erased, yet the erasing of his name comes a week earlier in this week's portion, which chronologically took place after the commands in Parshat Tetzaveh. In the way it worked, God commanded them to build the temple, and only after that he forgave the Jewish people. Hence, similarly, it would have been more appropriate to allude to this matter that Moshe's request, even though made conditionally, was fulfilled in one of the later Torah readings when we already know that he made such a request. Thus, the fact that Moshe's request was fulfilled in this Torah reading leads to the conclusion that erase me, I beg of you, from your book, as a connection with the content of the Parshas Tetzaveh. Says the Rabbi, chronologically, the request to be erased happened much later in the next 2, 3, 4 portions. The fact that this week his name is erased, there is an inner connection between the content of the Torah to the request of Moshe.
The request to erase is next week, you said, or 2, 3, 4 weeks. Is it next week or 2 or 3 or 4?
Next week is when the golden calf appeared.
Is that when he says it or no?
That's when he says it, after the golden calf.
So it's next week.
It might either next week or even farther,
Right.
Because the begging of the request came, we don't know, it came after the golden calf.
Right.
Could be the requests to build the temples to the tabernacle, came before the golden calf, meaning the portion after Tisa, Vayakel and Pekudei are about things that happened before the golden calf.
Okay.
So his request should come even after that. Chronologically, it did not happen yet. It happened for sure after the Golden Calf, which is next week. And in fact, it happened probably after the following two portions. Ein mukdam u'cha b'Torah. There is no chronological order in the Torah, which is correct. That's the reason. However, being chosen, this week's being chosen, and nothing to allude to it in this week's Torah portion. When he says, erase me from the book, if you don't forgive them, next week, it's in the next week's portion. Yet it's erased this week. It must be because there is an inner connection between the content of the Torah portion to that request. Another point requires clarifications. The intent in the statement of Moshe was not mentioned in this Torah reading, was not mentioned in this Torah reading, the intent in the statement that Moshe was not mentioned in this Torah reading is not that Moshe is not referred to, but his name is not mentioned. Indeed, Moshe is referred to in many verses in this Torah reading. Furthermore, the beginning of the Torah reading, from which its name is derived, Tetzaveh, that's the name of the portion, and as is well known, the name of a Torah reading alludes to its overall content, is Ve'ata Tetzaveh, meaning, and you shall command, which refers specifically to Moshe. Moreover, as Kli Yakar states, a commentator to the Torah, Ve'ata refers to the very core of Moshe's essence. The core of a person's essence is both loftier and deeper within his being than his name. What the Rabbi is explaining, he's about to go, it's not that his name is totally not mentioned. The name Moshe you won't find, but referring to Moshe, commanding Moshe, instructing Moshe is all over this week's Torah portion. In fact, the beginning of the portion, the name of the portion is Ve'ata Tetzaveh, you shall command. What's the difference between Moshe, please command, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, tzav, or daber, speak, command, versus Ve'ata Tetzaveh? The Kli Yakar says, Ve'ata, referring to the core, the essence of Moshe. Moshe's name is an external aspect of Moshe. So actually, God is connecting with Moshe on a much deeper level in this week's portion. Every time God comments in this week's portion, it says Ve'ata, 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 you, to the core, to the essence, as opposed to calling Moshe by name, which is external. And here is the Rabbi is saying, a name enables one person to address another. Moreover, the core of the core of a person's essence is so lofty and deep that it does not relate to others, thus it is above a name. What's the name when you call somebody by name? It is to distinguish him from the other people. It is to call his attention. It is to relate to him. So it's about connecting to others. It's very external. Ata, you, essence, is the core, the essence of a person. It's much deeper. Therefore, the manner in which Moshe is erased from the Torah reading is somewhat paradoxical. His name is not mentioned. That's true. However, the Torah reading begins, you shall command, referring to an even loftier dimension of his being than his name, Moshe. If you want to erase his name, talk about what the Jewish people are doing. Are they building like Vayakel, Pekudei? Nothing about Moshe commanding. But the whole section, every chapter is dealing with you command them this, you command them that. When you say you reach to a much deeper level of Moshe than by name. The above can be clarified by first explaining the great significance of Moshe's request. Let's talk about Moshe's request to be erased. Moshe says, erase me, I beg of you, from your book, which you have written. That, as Rashi states, refers to the entire Torah. Moshe says to God, if you do not forgive the Jewish people, I don't want my name to appear in the entire Torah. The book that you have, my name appears every portion, except in the three books. I don't want my name anywhere in the Torah. Moshe is identified with the Torah. It was he who was, as reflected by our sage's statement, that the Torah is called the Torah of Moshe, the 5 books of Moshe. It is a gift that he gave us because he dedicated his life to it. From this, we can appreciate that the request to erase me from your book The entire Torah affects the very core of Moshe's being, the level at which he is one with the Torah. Moshe and Torah is one. Moshe emet v'Torato emet. Korach, when he was swallowed by the ground because he rebelled against Moshe, his sons found themselves a spot down in underground, and they shouted, Moshe emes v'Toros emes. Moshe is truth and his Torah is true. Not v'Torat Hashem, not the Torah of God, Torah of Moshe. Moshe being very existence is Torah. Moshe and Torah cannot be separated. That's why you call it 5 books of Moses. And Shabbat, we say that Moshe received a gift from God, which is the Torah. He was kind enough, he was very kind to share it with us. But it's Moshe's book. So when you say erase my name from the entire Torah, what in essence you're referring to is getting rid of the entire identity of what Moshe is. Why did Moshe put this at risk? In other words, it's going to change his very identity. To secure atonement for the Jews who sinned by worshiping the golden calf, committing the most serious of all sins, one so severe that all subsequent sins and the punishments for them is connected to the sin of the golden calf, as reflected by Rashi's interpretation of the verse, "On the day I make an accounting of their sins, I will take their sin into account." In other words, every time the Jewish people are getting punished since the golden calf, they are being punished for the golden calf. Anytime there is a punishment by God for a particular behavior, the punishment is more severe than it should have been because it's taking away some of the golden calf. So the mother of all sins is the golden calf. Now, not all Jewish people committed that sin. Moshe, that's where Rabbi is going to go, is stuck, willing to sacrifice his very identity for the people that were disturbing or disrupting the connection, the core of the connection between God and a Jew. Yes?
You can have a tendency against God to say, enough already. Why every time it's out of proportion?
Because he was kind enough to allow us to live. He wanted to get rid of the Jewish people. So now the Jewish people are alive.
Someone say, how long can you punish? It's a forever sentence. That's our existence.
But it's better. All I'm saying is it's better than the alternative. The alternative is not to have Jewish people except for Moshe, to start a whole new nation.
Doesn't he say to the 1,000th generation?
Right. Huh?
Isn't it about you're saying to the 1,000th?
Kindness.
Kindness to the 1,000th generation?
Evil or destruction is 4 to 5. 4. 3 to 4. Let it be 3 to 4. That's it. However, the golden calf was so severe that they had no right to stay in the marriage with God. And God say, I'll keep them on the account that the punishment that they deserve will not come at once, but will come over time. So we didn't pay up the whole. I wish God would be kind on us, as is always, to remove that punishment. Says the Rabbi, this is very difficult to understand. How is it that Moshe, who is intrinsically bound up with the Torah, risked his entire being for those Jews who committed the sin of worship in the golden calf? This included even those who made the calf, who acted in contradiction of the commandment, you shall not have any other gods. Do not make a graven image, thus tearing themselves entirely away from the Torah. So that, you know how many people go stand the golden calf? Anybody knows? 3,000 men. They were all killed by the Levites. All the rest of Jewish people who stood there and did not protest, and that's why were punished. So those 3,000 people went against the very core, the essence of the marriage between the Jew and God. How is it possible that Moshe comes out to defend those people who he is willing to sacrifice his entire identity, to let go of the Torah, erase my name from the book that you have written, meaning that Moshe and Torah will have nothing to do with each other, and most likely we will never have the Torah. More clarification is required. What was meant by Moshe's request, if not erase me, I beg of you, from your book, meaning from the entire Torah? What is the connection between the two elements of Moshe's request? that if God does not forgive the Jews for their sin of the golden calf, he should erase Moshe from the Torah. The Rabbi says we need to understand the relationship here between the sin and the demand. They worship a golden calf. They went and cheated on God. And what does Moshe said? If you do not atone, I don't want to be in the Torah. What's Torah have to do with the sin? You can say, don't talk to me anymore. You can say, find somebody else to go with me. You can say anything you want, but the relationship between the two doesn't make sense. And we need to understand that. We're going to skip the next two paragraphs. Here is the Rabbi's answer. The answer to the above, to answer the above. Moshe was utterly one with the Jewish people. There is no way he could be separated from the Jewish people as a whole, or from any individual Jew. To quote Rashi, Moshe is Israel and Israel is Moshe. We find many times that God compared the Jewish people to Moshe and Moshe to the entire Jewish people. In other words, they are united as one. When you speak about Moshe, you speak about Jewish people. When you speak about Jewish people, you speak about Moshe. Who represented the entire Jewish people? Moshe. Who represent the Moshe? The Jewish people. They are one with each other. For that reason, the sin of the golden calf brought about a descent within Moshe. Thus, the phrase "God descend," our sages read as "descend from you, greatness." When the Jewish people worship the golden calf down there in the desert, Moshe is up and high in the Mount Sinai speaking to God. What does God say to him? Go descend. The simple literal text meaning get down from Mount Sinai, but the figuratively go descend is once they sin, it affects you. There is a defect within you. Now, because you represent the Jewish people, when they separated themselves from God, you are also being separated. So there is no place for us to be united. Go down from you, greatness. On the surface, there was no reason for this sin to affect Moshe. He had absolutely no connection with the sin of the golden calf. It was not even possible for him to have protested against the Jewish people's sin. At that time, he was physically atop of the mountain, Mount Sinai, and spiritually he was in another realm entirely. Why then was he affected by the sin? By that sin, you can say he could not have protested. Stop it! He wasn't part of it. He wasn't aware. He was on top of the mountain in a whole different country. Why should he be affected by what somebody does down on the ground? In resolution, since Moshe is utterly one with the Jewish people, he was endowed with the greatness solely because of them, and the greatness is possessed was one with theirs. Accordingly, the sin of the golden calf and the descent is brought about within the Jewish people, inevitably brought about a descent within Moshe. Says the Rabbi, because they are one, they are united. When the Jewish people sin, the effect is on Moshe as well, even though he had nothing to do with it. In fact, if he was aware of it, he would have stopped it. The oneness between Moshe and the Jewish people is even deeper than his oneness with the Torah. We find similar relationship between the Jewish people and God. The Torah and the Holy One, blessed be He, are all one. This is the inner meaning of our sage's statement that Anochi, I am, the first word of the Ten Commandments, is an acronym for an Aramaic phrase, Anan Nafshi Ktaviti Avid, I interpreted as, I have inscribed and conveyed my soul in this text, meaning that God wrote down and invested his very essence in the Torah. Nevertheless, the unity of the Jewish people with God is even deeper and loftier. As indicated by our sage's statement, Israel preceded the Torah. The Rabbi is saying, just to summarize, the Rabbi is saying there is a certain unity between the Jewish people and God, and that unity is so connected, so well close, that it's even greater than the unity between God and the Torah. Torah is God's wisdom. Jewish people are God's children. So I think in Tanya we discovered the Torah is an expression or something comes out of the brains. Child is the essence, a piece of cell, a stem cell, a DNA that transformed, that transferred and created a child. So a child, the Jewish people are the essence of God, a part of God. The Torah is an expression like a sun's ray versus when I take a bottle of water and I pour it to your cup.
The Rabbi said, yeah,
So therefore, the Jewish people preceded the Torah. Yeah.
how could that be? You read somewhere that the Torah was
Kadma la'olam.
2,000 years.
The Torah preceded the universe 2,000 years.
So how can
And
you
the Jewish people preceded the Torah 2,000 years.
2,000 years too.
Yeah.
remember that?
They're always in God, yes.
Okay.
But the Tanya explains it in a way that is just should, and I'll repeat it again. If I have a bottle of water and I pour a little bit of water to a glass, the water, the content is the same. Learning about the quality of the water in the glass tells me that exactly same thing in the water that's in the bottle. Because you took some of it, and the quantity, the fact that it's very little, does not change the quality. Sun's ray, the light that we have here, is not the sun. The sun is not here. The sun is very far. It's a sun's ray. The sun's ray cannot tell us too much about the sun. You know why? It's not the essence of the sun. It's a reflection of the sun. When I teach you something you didn't know, you got the idea? It does not reflect on my entire intellectual capacity or my full knowledge of the item that we discuss, because I shared with you an array of the idea. But so when you have a child, that child is part of who you are. That child is your expression. Wisdom, Torah is God's wisdom, knowledge. It's an expression that comes out, expressed or emanated from God's intellect. And therefore, there is no comparison. The children came way, way before the Torah. Even we're skipping the next paragraph. Number 5. The above also explains Moshe's request. Now we can understand why Moshe is asking, erase me from your book. And the reason he put at risk the core of his being, as it was connected with the Torah for the sake of even the Jews who made the golden calf. Now we can understand, even though he's defending here the lowest of the law of the Jewish people, which serves as a source of Torah law, an instruction for the entire, page 459, instruction for the entire Jewish people. Nevertheless, this was a punishment because no matter how lofty, I skipped on page 458. I am skipping, I'm going into to cite the story. We continue on page 458. The fact that the oneness between Moshe and the Jewish people surpassed even his oneness with the Torah brought about 2 consequences. Number 1, his Mesirat Nefesh is giving up his life and everything he has for the Jewish people, took precedence over and surpassed his Mesirat Nefesh for the Torah. So when he has to choose between Torah and the Jewish people come first, because it's much greater. The unity between Moshe and the Jewish people is much greater than the unity between Moshe and Torah. B, we're going to back to now, we're skipping to page 459. The unity of Moshe with the Jewish people encompasses, and as a result, he was willing to sacrifice his life for every Jew, regardless of his spiritual standing, even those who made the golden calf. Since his bond with the other Jews is loftier than his bond with the Torah, the fact that a Jew cuts himself off from the Torah does not nullify that bond, as our sages state. Even though he sinned, he remains a Jew. In other words, because the bond between Moshe and a Jew is so strong, stronger than the bond between Moshe and the Torah cannot get between the Jew and Moshe, and cannot separate the Jew from Moshe. Even when a Jew sins, meaning he does not obey the Torah, he disobeys God, that will not sever the relationship between Moshe and a Jew. And therefore, when they sin, he would also continue caring for them and looking after them. We continue now. This is also the meaning of Moshe's request. If you bear their sin, good. But if not, erase me, I beg of you, from your book. Moshe was both asking and demanding. If the sin of the golden calf is so severe that the Torah does not allow for this sin to be forgiven, That is, God would be willing to grant atonement, but the Torah would, as it were, persist in its charges against the Jewish people and prevent atonement from being granted, then erase me from your book, from the Torah. The erasure of Moshe's name would reveal, without any veils at all, the essential oneness of Moshe shares with the Jewish people, and through that, the unity of the Jews with God that surpasses his unity with the Torah. The revelation of this essential unity would bring about atonement for the Jews' sins, even the sin of the golden calf. Moreover, that unity would enable them to reestablish the bond with the Torah afterwards. What Moshe says to God is like that: please forgive them. If you tell me the Torah demands there is no forgiveness, because the Torah says it's a very severe sin, then I don't want the Torah, because the Torah is not, the bond between me and the Jew is much greater than the bond with me and the Torah. And if the Torah is the one who does not allow the Jew to survive, then the Torah should not be part of me. Erase me from your book. I don't want to be part of it. So the only way, he says, the purpose of the Torah is to unite the Jewish people and bring them closer with each other, bring them closer to God. As soon as the Torah serves to sever the relationship, to cut off the relationship between God and the Jew, Moshe said, I don't want that Torah. I have nothing to do with that Torah, because the cost is higher than the value I get. In other words, if the Torah has so much value, the Jew has so much value. If the Torah causes me to lose the Jew, then the Torah is unworthy for me to relate to.
The world's greatest attorney.
That's for sure. Based on the above, it is possible to understand the connection between Moshe's request, erase me, and God's instruction, Ve'ata Tetzaveh, and you shall command. Now we can go back. So we answered one question. The question is the relationship between the demand versus the sin. He says to them, if they sin the golden calf and you don't atone them, erase me from your book. Now we understand, because the Torah shouldn't stand between the Jew and God. If it does, it's not worthy. It's not worth it for the Torah to exist. That's what Moshe says. Now we need to go back. Why? Because he made a demand and God granted his demand. But because even though he made it on condition and condition wasn't met, some of it will be fulfilled, and it's fulfilled in this week's portion. What's the relations between the content of this week's portion to Moshe's demand? What's the question?
So God forgave them.
Yeah, he said.
But yet, we just heard that he kept punishing them little by little over a period of time.
So you say God forgave the Jewish people, but he's still punishing them. So what do you think the answer is?
The liability is still there.
I'm going to use an example. A man married a wife, and they had a very good wedding night. They enjoyed themselves after the wedding. The next night, he was found sleeping with somebody else. Do you think there is any merit for the marriage to last?
Depends.
I hope nobody experienced that. There is any merit for the marriage to last?
No.
Why not?
Can't trust the husband.
Can trust the husband.
Obviously, he's not happy with the wife he married.
At the pinnacle, no, okay. So obviously, in his action, then the demonstrate. This is what happened, by the way. The Jewish people received the Torah. It was a wedding. There was a chuppah canopy, the Mount Sinai, and within 40 days they cheated. God says there is no merit for me to stay married to the Jewish people, and therefore they have no right to exist anymore. Moshe says, if that's the case, the reason they have no merit is because in the book of Torah you told them not to cheat. But that book is not as valuable as the Jewish people. And if it causes you to lose the Jewish people, the wife, then get rid of the Torah. That's in essence what Moshe says. Now we understand the relationship. Now go back to the relationship. If the wife comes, if somebody, a friend of the husband, goes to the wife, he's actually a brother-in-law, cousin, a friend, goes to the wife and says, please, if you divorce him, you will not be able to see him nor all his friends. But I'm offering, please, I'm begging you to allow him to return to the house, live together, but we will have to put some type of ways to restrict him from being able to go and commit the same sin again. And he will pay a hefty price for the rest of his life. Do you think that if she forgives him, they can turn the page and move on without making restitution, without paying for that?
He has to pay for it.
He has to pay for it. For how long?
I don't know about your life, but it's forever.
I'll tell you, Rabbi, connections we've got now.
He rests his case. He's a good lawyer.
Huh?
I said the voice won't change it, you'll still pay for it.
That's forever. That's the payment.
When a couple comes to me for consultation and one of them wants to get divorced, I say to them, you think that divorce will end the relationship? It does not. It changes the dynamics of the relationship. It does not. The relationship, especially if there are children involved, this relationship doesn't end. It just changes. And sometimes you'd rather.
Sometimes it just ends the relationship. Rabbi, sometimes it just ends the relationship.
That's not easy.
Ko Amar Ali. Based on, and has a lot of experience. Based on the above, it is possible to understand the connection between Moshe's request, erase me, and God's instruction, V'ata Tetzaveh, and you shall command, the unity between Moshe and the Jewish people as a whole that transcends the Torah was manifest in Moshe's request, erase me from your book, is expressed in the phrase, you shall command the Jewish people, Tetzaveh, command. Command shows the same root as the word tzavta, meaning bond or connection. How do you say a good God's commandment? Mitzvah. You know why it's called mitzvah? You translate it to command, but there is another much more beautiful and deeper meaning to the word mitzvah, and that is connection. Tzavta is mean united or togetherness. So when God says to him in this expression, where he fulfills his request to be erased for the sake of the Jewish people, he used it, V'ata Tetzaveh, you shall command. No, you will bond. You bond with the Jewish people, and you bond is so strong, stronger than the Torah. So your entire identity was willing to sacrifice, you're willing to sacrifice your identity for the sake of Jewish people. And this is what the Rabbi says. Erase me for your book is expressed in the phrase, you shall command the Jewish people. Tetzaveh, command, shares the same word as the word tzavta, meaning bond and connection. Accordingly, one of the interpretations of the phrase V'ata Tetzaveh is you, the very essence of Moshe, will bond and connect with the Jews, forging them into a single entity. You, by sticking out for them, you are connected, you have connected them all together. Why? Because you care about the worst sinner like the holiest righteous man. They all are in the same way. We don't have much time. I'm going to give you a few levels. If you call Moshe by his name, Moshe is the greatest leader. The golden calf sinners are the worst, the opposite, polar opposite of what Moshe represents. But God says to him, because you stuck up for them and willing to sacrifice, what you demonstrated is that all Jewish people, regardless of their behavior, are equally the same. That's why he uses the word V'ata Tetzaveh, you shall command the Jewish people, you shall unite the Jewish people. That act demonstrated that you, the loftiest, and the other one who is a sinner of the worst kind, are all equally the same, and they defend each other. And the Rebbe goes on to say that's why we read about this week's Torah portion, different commands God gave Moshe to teach Aaron. Why didn't tell it to Aaron? He says, V'ata Tetzaveh et Aaron. There are a few. One is about the spices, and one is about the altar. I'm going to use those two. The Rebbe says that the spices, he tells Moshe to command Aaron to summon professionals to make the the aroma that is coming out, the incense, in a beautiful way. You know how many types of incense there were? 11. 11 types and 2 more to mix or to help with the mixture. But
You have a magic sponge.
from the 11, there was one of them that was very repulsive. Levona. Why did they have that repulsive one? To represent the worst type of Jewish people. They must be part of the overall picture. That's why the Ktoret is mentioned in this week's portion. Then the Rabbi says there is another one. Mizbeach, the altar, appears at the end of this week's portion, totally out of place. Because this week's portion is talking about the garments and the spices and the oil for the menorah. Building the menorah last week. Building the table last week. Building the ark last week. Everything was last week. The measurements, the walls, the tapestry, everything. One item appears at the end of this week's portion. Mizbeach, the altar. Why is it here? In fact, there was another altar that appears in last week's portion, where all the furniture, the golden one. This is the copper one. It appears at the end of the portion. So, Rabbi, what's the purpose of the altar? To atone for sins. Therefore, Moshe is the prime example of someone who is granting atonement. Why? Because he is connecting the Jewish people as a whole. He is the greatest, they are the lowest, but they are all equally the same. That's why the name is removed from this week's portion, because every part of this week's portion, Moshe is commanded with the words Ata Tetzaveh, you unite them. And therefore, it's the main thrust of every item that's mentioned in most of the items mentioned in this week's portion. Now we can understand that why this week's portion is chosen to erase Moshe's name. It's not a sign of punishment, but rather due to the fact that he makes such a condition, it elevated him to such a degree. A, God atoned the Jewish people, and B, God talks to his essence and core, not the extension of who he is, and C, he is the one who is the catalyst that makes all the Jewish people as one, even those who are grave sinners, that the Torah is separating between them and God, because the Torah said study Torah, and the Torah says keep kosher, and they don't. So the Torah comes and sticks around and says, hey, you're not serving God, you don't belong. Moshe says, no, the Jewish people come before the Torah, and the Torah has no right to separate them. What's the message for us? Anytime you see a sinner, you see someone who disobeys God, it is not an excuse not to connect with them, because we are all equally the same. We are God's children. And every time we see someone who the Torah tells us that he's a sinner, is separated from God, we can turn to the Torah and say, at the end of the day, he's much greater than the Torah, and therefore the Torah cannot create a rift between him and God. And that should conclude our lesson today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.